Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're really diving into the deep end of complexity, aren't we?
We really are. It's almost dizzying when you look at the range of things happening. You've got these incredible cosmic discoveries on one side.
Yeah, like looking 10,000 light years away at something truly breathtaking.
Exactly. And then, almost in the same breath, you're pulled right back down to Earth, facing these really intense global crises, geopolitical flashpoints.
And even fundamental questions like, do we actually know how many people live on this planet?
That's the one that really jumps out, isn't it? The potential scale of miscalculation there is just staggering.
It absolutely is. So our mission today, as always, is to try and cut through some of that noise for you. We're going to navigate from, interstellar objects behaving strangely to the tech giants powering AI.
And then straight into the tough stuff, the conflict in Ukraine, humanitarian disasters, the economic pressures people are feeling.
We'll connect the dots, try to challenge some of the easy narratives, and hopefully leave you feeling a bit more grounded, a bit more well-informed about what truly matters in this incredibly complex world.
Sounds like a plan. Where should we start? Up in space.
Let's do it. Let's start way out there with something that's genuinely rewriting the rulebook, it seems. This interstellar comet, 3ILS.
Ah, yes, 8TLS. This is fascinating because it's not from our solar system. It's an interstellar visitor.
An invader, you could say.
Pretty much. And as it gets closer to our sun, scientists have noticed, well, they're calling it an unusual shift in its trajectory. It's not moving quite like the models predict.
Unusual shift.
Right.
What does that mean in practical terms? Is it speeding up, slowing down, changing direction unexpectedly?
It seems to be deviating from the purely gravitational path we'd expect. And alongside that, it's also brightened much more rapidly than anticipated. It's just not behaving itself, basically.
Okay, so if our models are mostly built on gravity, especially Newton's laws for these kinds of movements, and this thing is just veering off course, what does that imply? Does it undermine those core assumptions?
It certainly challenges them, or at least suggests they're incomplete for these kinds of objects. The thinking is that non-gravitational forces are playing a much bigger part than we may be accounted for.
Like what kind of forces?
Well, the most likely culprit is outgassing. As the comet gets heated by the sun, ices and other volatile materials on its surface turn into gas, shooting out in jets.
Ah, so like tiny, unpredictable rocket thrusters pushing it around.
Exactly. They're not strong, but over vast distances, these little nudges can add up and cause a significant deviation from a purely gravity-driven path. It means predicting where these interstellar objects are going is potentially a lot more complicated.
We need better models, then, that factor in the comet's own activity, not just external gravity.
Precisely. It forces a rethink, especially if we start seeing more of these visitors, which many astronomers expect. Understanding their behavior is key.
Okay, that's a big adjustment happening way out there. Let's bring our focus a bit closer to home, though still in space. China's Tiangong space station. There's been a new launch, right?
Yes, the Shenzhou 21 mission successfully launched. They sent a new crew of astronauts up to Tiangong for a 6-month stay.
Just a routine crew rotation, or is there more to this mission?
It's more than just routine. China's emphasizing the scientific experiments they'll be conducting up there. And interestingly, they're also highlighting international cooperation aspects.
International cooperation. That's significant given the geopolitical tensions around space exploration.
It is. China seems keen to position Tiangong not just as a national achievement, but as a platform open, at least in principle, to collaboration. It's part of cementing their role as a major, maybe even dominant player in space moving forward. The pace of their launches is really steady now.
They're building capability and presence very quickly. And speaking of spectacular views from space, just in time for Halloween, we got this incredible image of the cosmic Bat Nebula.
Oh, that VST image is stunning. VST being the VLT survey telescope run by the European Southern Observatory, ESO, down in Chile.
And this cosmic bat, where is it exactly, and how big are we talking?
It's about 10,000 light years away from us.
Yeah.
Located in the Milky Way between the constellations of Circinus and Norma, and the scale is just immense. The image captures an area that appears about 4 times wider than the full moon does in our sky.
4 times the width of the moon. That's vast.
Yeah.
And that incredible red color, almost spooky looking. What causes that?
That deep crimson glow is classic H-alpha emission. It's the light given off by hydrogen gas when it's energized or ionized.
Ionized by what?
by intense radiation from very young, very hot stars that are recently formed within the nebula. In this case, the stars belong to two open clusters called RCW94 and RCW95. They're basically lighting up their own cradle.
So it's a stellar nursery. We're seeing stars being born.
Exactly. It's a beautiful textbook example of a star-forming region. The energy from those new stars pushes back the gas and dust, creating these incredible shapes like giant cosmic bats, apparently.
A powerful reminder of the constant cycle of creation happening out there. Okay, let's bring that observational power down, crashing back to Earth. And this is a big one. A study suggesting we might have dramatically miscounted the human population.
Yeah, this is potentially earth-shattering, no pun intended. The current global population estimate sits around 8.2 billion people.
Which already feels like a huge number.
It does. But this new research, looking closely at data collection methods, especially in rural areas and less developed regions, suggests massive inaccuracies.
Oh, massive.
The study posits that the real number could be, well, significantly higher, possibly up to 60% higher than the official 8.2 billion figure.
Wait, 60%? That's not a small error margin. That's potentially adding billions more people to the count.
Billions. It suggests we might be closer to what? 13 billion people? Maybe more? If that upper estimate holds true, it's hard to even wrap your head around.
Okay, assuming this is even partially correct, what are the consequences? If our basic count is that far off, what does that break?
It breaks almost everything related to global planning and policy. Resource allocation, for starters, food security, water access, healthcare provision, infrastructure development. All these are based on population estimates.
If you think there are, say, 10 million people in a region, but there are actually 16 million, your plans are fundamentally flawed from the start.
Precisely. The strain on resources, the potential for social unrest, the environmental impact, it all becomes drastically underestimated. Sustainable development goals become almost meaningless if the baseline is wrong.
How could the count be so wrong? What are the specific issues with current methods?
A lot of it comes down to reliance on census data, which can be infrequent, politically manipulated, or just very difficult to conduct accurately in remote, conflict-affected, or rapidly urbanizing informal settlements. Nomadic populations are notoriously hard to count too.
So we need new methods, relying more on things like satellite imagery, mobile phone data, AI analysis maybe?
That seems to be the implication. We need cross-reference methods, using big data analytics and remote sensing to complement, or perhaps even eventually replace, some traditional census techniques in hard-to-reach areas, but the political will and investment needed for that, that's another question.
A truly profound potential miscalculation. Okay, let's stick with hidden things, but move to a different environment.
Yeah.
Under the Antarctic ice, the unmanned submersible RAN went missing.
Yes, this was a significant loss. RAN was operated by the University of Gothenburg, Sweden, and it was on a critical mission under the Dotson ice shelf in the Amundsen Sea.
What was it doing down there?
It was mapping the seabed, but more importantly, it was measuring water currents, temperature, salinity, right near the grounding line where the glacier meets the ocean floor. This is ground zero for understanding how warming ocean waters are melting these massive ice shelves from below.
Which is crucial data for predicting sea level rise, right?
Absolutely critical. The melt dynamics in places like the Amundsen Sea are thought to be a major driver of future sea level rise. RAN was gathering data nobody else could reach. And then it just vanished. No signal, no recovery.
Gone without a trace. But didn't it send back something intriguing right before it disappeared?
It did. Among its final transmissions was data indicating some previously uncharted geometric patterns on the seabed beneath the ice shelf.
Geometric patterns, like unnatural looking, or just surprising geological formations.
The reports just say geometric. It could be specific geological structures, perhaps related to water flow channels under the ice, but the phrasing definitely sparks curiosity. Unfortunately, without RAN, investigating further is now much harder.
So a major setback for climate science and a little bit of a mystery left behind. That underwater environment is incredibly hostile, I imagine.
Extremely. Intense pressure, freezing temperatures, zero visibility outside its lights, risk of getting trapped under the ice. It's one of the toughest places on Earth to operate autonomous vehicles.
Okay, let's move from lost technology to rediscovered life. This is a fantastic story. Coelacanths found hidden in museum collections.
Yeah, this is brilliant. Coelacanths, as you know, are often called living fossils. They're these large, prehistoric-looking fish.
Thought to be extinct for millions of years until one was famously caught off South Africa in 1938, right?
Exactly. It shocked the scientific world. They look almost identical to fossils from, like, 200 million years ago. And now, researchers digging through collections in British museums have found over 50 coelacanth fossils that have been sitting there for up to 150 years, just misidentified.
Mislabeled, hiding in plain sight in museum drawers.
Pretty much. They were likely collected in the 19th century but classified as something else, or perhaps just put aside as unidentified curiosities. Now, with modern techniques and a fresh look, they've been recognized for what they are.
That's incredible. It makes you wonder how many other significant finds are just sitting in archives waiting for the right eyes.
Absolutely. Museum collections are vast treasure troves, and re-examining old specimens with new knowledge or technology often yields amazing discoveries.
And why are coelacanths so important, evolutionarily speaking?
They represent a really crucial branch in the tree of life. They are lobe-finned fish, which means their fins have a bony structure, almost like a rudimentary limb.
Ah, the link between fish and tetrapods, the four-limbed vertebrates that eventually crawled onto land.
Precisely. They're not our direct ancestors, but they're closely related to the group that did make that transition. Studying them, both living and fossil forms, gives us invaluable clues about how that huge evolutionary leap happened, how fins became legs, essentially.
So finding more fossils, even ones collected long ago, adds vital data points to that story.
Definitely. Each specimen can tell us something new about their variation, their distribution, their anatomy. It's a fantastic piece of scientific detective work.
Okay, from the slow march of evolution over 200 million years, let's shift gears dramatically. Let's talk about the lightning-fast evolution of the digital world and corporate power. Amazon Web Services, AWS, they're having a good run.
A good run is putting it mildly. Their latest performance absolutely smashed expectations. We're talking revenue growth around 20.2%, hitting something like $33 billion.
$33 billion in revenue for cloud services.
Wow.
What's driving that explosive growth?
It's almost entirely down to the artificial intelligence boom. All these AI models, the large language models, the generative AI, they require absolutely massive amounts of computing power and data storage.
And AWS provides the plumbing for that, the infrastructure.
Exactly. They provide the foundational cloud infrastructure, the servers, the storage, the networking, the specialized chips that companies need to build and run these AI applications. The demand is just insatiable right now.
So this isn't just good news for Amazon. It's propping up a big part of the stock market rally we've seen.
It's arguably the main engine behind what people are calling the AI trade. This huge demand for cloud capacity and the specialized hardware, particularly from companies like NVIDIA, which makes the GPUs. It's boosting the stocks of the so-called Magnificent Seven tech giants, including Apple as well.
And how does AWS stack up against its competitors, like Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud?
AWS still holds the dominant market share, somewhere around 31%. Microsoft Azure is growing fast, trying to catch up, especially by integrating AI tools into its own offerings. And Google Cloud is also a major player. But AWS remains the clear leader for now. The digital world, especially the AI part of it, effectively runs on their infrastructure.
But that level of dependence creates vulnerabilities, doesn't it? If so much relies on this infrastructure, what happens when it's attacked? We have a report about a major breach at Ribbon Communications.
Yeah, this is sobering. Ribbon Communications is a significant U.S. telecom equipment and software provider. They supply critical technology to major carriers like Verizon and others.
And they were breached.
Severely. The report indicates that nation-state hackers were inside their corporate networks, undetected, for an incredibly long period over 10 months.
10 months. From when to when?
Apparently from around December 2024 right through to October 2025. Just operating silently deep inside the network.
That's not your average smash and grab cyber attack. 10 months implies espionage reconnaissance.
Yeah.
Something much more strategic.
Absolutely. That kind of persistence, the ability to remain hidden for so long, strongly points towards sophisticated state-backed actors. They weren't just looking for a quick buck. They were likely mapping networks, potentially stealing sensitive data, or even positioning themselves for future disruption.
Giffen Ribbon supplies major U.S. telcos. The implications for critical infrastructure are huge, right?
It's a nightmare scenario, frankly. If the systems managing core telecommunications networks are compromised, it affects everything: government communications, emergency services, financial transactions, civilian internet access, the backbone of modern society.
Are experts pointing fingers at specific countries? And does this change how we define critical infrastructure? Does it now have to include key suppliers like Ribbon, not just the main providers?
The specific attribution is usually kept classified in these situations, but the techniques often align with known state actors from places like Russia, China, Iran, or North Korea. And yes, this incident absolutely fuels the argument that the security perimeter needs to expand. Any company providing essential components or software for critical infrastructure is critical infrastructure itself and needs to be secured accordingly. The supply chain is often the weakest link.
A chilling reminder of the digital battlefields we're living on. Okay, let's talk about the human cost or perceived cost of some of this tech boom. The debate around AI and job losses seems to be intensifying.
It really is. It flared up recently when Fox host Martha McCallum was interviewing Kevin Hassett, who used to be the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors.
And she pressed him on layoffs.
Yeah, she pointed to recent job cuts at big companies like UPS and Amazon, directly questioning if these were being driven by automation and AI displacing human workers.
A very direct question.
Yeah.
What was Hassett's response? Did he agree?
He pushed back, actually. His argument was essentially that these kinds of layoff announcements happen frequently, almost annually, as companies restructure or adapt to technological shifts. He tried to frame it as part of a normal, recurring economic cycle, not necessarily a unique AI-driven apocalypse.
So the classic argument, technological progress causes short-term disruption, but ultimately creates new jobs and overall growth.
That was the gist of it, yes.
Yeah.
He invoked historical parallels, the Industrial Revolution, the rise of computers, arguing that while some jobs disappear, new ones emerge. It's the perennial debate. Painful transition versus long-term benefit. But obviously, that's cold comfort if you're the one losing your job right now.
Indeed. The lived experience versus the macroeconomic theory. Okay, speaking of AI everyone interacts with, let's talk about ChatGPT. OpenAI is constantly rolling out updates, but they seem to be navigating some tricky ethical waters.
They really are. On the feature front, they've introduced things like ChatGPT Atlas, which integrates a web browser directly into the chat experience, allowing it to pull in real-time information.
So it can browse the current web, not just rely on its training data.
Exactly, which makes it much more up-to-date and potentially useful for current events or specific searches. They're also apparently planning to introduce options for mature content, but only for users who verify they are adults, starting maybe around December 2025.
Mature content, that sounds like opening a whole new can of worms.
It absolutely does. Content moderation, age verification, potential misuse. It's fraught with ethical challenges. But the bigger, immediate controversy is around mental health.
Right, this has been bubbling for a while. What's the latest?
Well, OpenAI highlights that they've collaborated with over 170 specialists to try and improve how ChatGPT responds to users expressing distress or mental health concerns.
But concerns remain.
Very much so. There are alarming reports, and OpenAI hasn't directly refuted the numbers, I believe suggesting that potentially over 1 million users each week express thoughts related to suicide while interacting with ChatGPT.
1 million a week, that's staggering.
It is, and it raises profound questions. Is the AI inadvertently triggering these thoughts? Is it becoming a dangerous substitute for real human support? Can an algorithm ever safely handle such sensitive interactions, even with expert input? It's a huge, ongoing ethical debate.
And on top of the ethical issues, there are technical ones too. The new Atlas browser integration has problems.
Yes, almost immediately after launch, security researchers found a vulnerability. Apparently, it was possible to craft malicious links or inputs that could inject and execute harmful code through the Atlas browser feature.
So a potential security risk for users.
Potentially, yes. OpenAI likely patched it quickly, but it highlights the constant tension. Rolling out powerful new features rapidly versus ensuring they're completely secure, it's a high-wire act.
Definitely walking a tightrope. Okay, let's shift to a different corner of the social tech world. Bluesky, the decentralized platform, kind of a Twitter X alternative. How's it doing?
It's reached a significant milestone in terms of user signups, apparently hitting 40 million registered users.
40 million, that sounds pretty good for a newer decentralized platform.
It's a solid number for signups, yeah. And they've just introduced a really interesting feature currently in beta, a dislike button.
A dislike button, not just the absence of a like, but an active dislike. That's unusual for social media, isn't it?
It really is. Most platforms focus entirely on positive engagement metrics, likes, hearts, retweets. Bluesky seems to be experimenting with allowing users to express negative feedback directly on posts.
What's the thinking behind that? Better content filtering, discouraging bad content.
It could be a mix of things. It might help train the algorithms to show you less of what you dislike, improve content moderation by flagging unpopular or problematic posts, or maybe just provide a more nuanced way for users to react beyond simply liking or ignoring. It's a deliberate challenge to the established like economy.
Interesting experiment. But are those 40 million registered users actually using the platform regularly? What about retention?
That seems to be the bigger challenge. Reports suggest their number of active daily users has actually dropped significantly in recent months, maybe from around 2.5 million down to 1.5 million.
Ouch. So lots of people checked it out, but maybe aren't sticking around.
That seems to be the pattern. Getting initial signups is one thing, especially for a platform generating buzz as an alternative. But building that daily habit, that deep engagement needed to rival established players like X, that's proving much harder for Bluesky and frankly for most decentralized social media platforms so far.
The network effect is hard to overcome. Before we move on from tech, just a quick mention, Elon Musk teasing a flying car.
Yeah, typical Musk hyperbole, perhaps, but he did mention something about a Tesla project that could be the most memorable product ever, hinting at something like a flying car. Whether that's serious or just generating headlines, who knows?
We'll file that under Believe It When We See It. Okay, let's pivot now to some very serious global geopolitical flashpoints and military standoffs. Starting with Ukraine, where the situation in the east seems to be escalating dramatically.
Yes, the reports coming out are deeply concerning. Ukrainian President Zelensky has stated that Russia has amassed a huge number of troops. He cited a figure of around 170,000 pushing towards the city of Pokrovsk in the eastern Donetsk region.
Pokrovsk. Why is that city so significant?
It's a major Ukrainian-held stronghold and a critical logistics hub in Donetsk Oblast. A large-scale Russian offensive aimed at capturing it would represent a significant escalation and could lead to one of the most intense battles of the conflict recently. It signals a determined Russian push in that sector.
And Russia, meanwhile, is claiming successes in disrupting Ukraine's ability to supply its troops.
That's the narrative from the Russian Ministry of Defense, the MOD. They claim their air force successfully targeted and destroyed a key bridge over the Volchia River, which is located further west in the Dnipropetrovsk region.
A bridge strike aimed at cutting supply lines.
Exactly. Russia asserts this bridge was vital for transporting Ukrainian military equipment and ammunition towards the eastern front lines. They frame it as a major blow to Ukrainian logistics. They also recently claimed the capture of a village, Novoaleksandrovka, asserting it's strategically important for controlling supply routes near the front.
So intense fighting on the ground, attempts to choke off supplies. But what about efforts towards peace? Any movement there? Or are the diplomatic channels just as gridlocked?
Completely gridlocked, it seems, and the rhetoric is hardening. You have starkly opposing viewpoints on how to even approach peace.
Give us the contrast. What's the Ukrainian and Western perspective on recent events and peace efforts?
Well, for instance, the G7 energy ministers recently came out strongly condemning Russia's ongoing attacks targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. They went so far as to call it a form of nuclear terrorism.
Nuclear terrorism. Why that specific term?
They're citing the immense danger these attacks pose, not just by causing blackouts, but by potentially disrupting safety systems at nuclear power plants, like the Zaporizhzhia facility, which is currently under Russian occupation but still operated by Ukrainian staff. The risk of a catastrophic accident, they argue, is being dangerously heightened by these strikes.
A very strong accusation. How does the Russian side or those aligned with them respond to peace proposals like the EU-backed plan?
They dismiss them out of hand. We saw Viktor Medvedchuk, who's an exiled Ukrainian opposition figure considered pro-Moscow, publicly labeled the 12-point peace plan supported by the European Union as nonsense.
Why nonsense? What's his objection?
His argument, reflecting Moscow's likely position, is that the plan contains preconditions that Russia will simply never agree to. Specifically, demands for Russia to withdraw from all occupied territories, including Crimea, and pay substantial reparations to Ukraine.
So non-starters from the Russian perspective.
Exactly. Medvedchuk claims these points are included deliberately to make the plan unacceptable to Russia, thereby allowing the West to blame Moscow for the lack of peace while the conflict continues. It's a battle over who gets to define the terms of negotiation, and right now, the sides are worlds apart.
And this feeds into a broader ideological framing of the conflict too, doesn't it? We saw comments from Russian Security Council Secretary Shoigu.
Yes, Sergei Shoigu has been emphasizing not just military might, but what he calls Russia's spiritual backbone. He recently claimed Russia is invincible because of its adherence to conservative, traditional values, which he contrasts with Western liberalism.
So framing it as a civilizational clash, not just a territorial war.
Precisely. It portrays the conflict as a defense of Russian identity and values against perceived Western value aggression. This kind of rhetoric aims to solidify domestic support and justify the immense costs of the war on ideological grounds.
We also saw Russian Senator Kosachev defending European leaders like Hungary's Orban or Slovakia's Fico when they get labeled pro-Moscow.
Right. Konstantin Kosachev basically said that label is used by critics as an insult, but it should actually be seen as a compliment. He argued that leaders labeled pro-Moscow are simply prioritizing their own country's national interests rather than following dictates from Brussels or Washington. It's an attempt to reframe alignment with Russia as pragmatic nationalism.
Okay, let's shift focus to U.S. foreign policy now, specifically regarding Venezuela. There seems to be some confusing messaging coming from the Trump administration.
Yes, it's quite contradictory. President Trump recently gave a very direct denial when asked about potential U.S. military strikes inside Venezuela targeting drug operations. He said, quote, "No, it's not true."
A flat denial. But doesn't that contradict earlier rhetoric and, more importantly, actions on the ground?
It absolutely does. This denial comes after a period of heightened tensions, previous threats, and a very significant U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean Sea, ostensibly for counter-narcotics operations.
What kind of buildup are we talking about?
We're talking thousands of U.S. troops deployed to the region, along with major naval assets, including the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford. That's a huge amount of firepower for just chasing drug smugglers.
And haven't there already been incidents involving U.S. forces engaging vessels near Venezuela, resulting in casualties?
Yes, that's a crucial point. There have been confirmed operations where U.S. forces have intercepted and engaged vessels suspected of drug trafficking, and these encounters have led to deaths.
So actions that look very much like military intervention, even if limited, are already happening.
Correct. And these actions have drawn strong condemnation. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, specifically called these incidents extrajudicial killings and expressed deep concern about the pattern of U.S. operations in the area.
So the president says no strikes, but the military presence is huge and lethal engagements have occurred. It's hard to reconcile those things.
It is. It creates uncertainty about U.S. intentions and strategy regarding Venezuela. Is it posturing? Is a larger intervention still possible? Or are these denials meant to manage domestic or international reaction to ongoing lower-level operations? It's very unclear.
Okay, moving from that uncertainty to undeniable humanitarian crises. The situation in Sudan, particularly after the fall of El-Fasher, sounds catastrophic.
It truly is horrific. El-Fasher, a major city in Darfur, was recently captured by the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF militia. This group has a long and brutal history of alleged atrocities.
And the immediate impact on civilians.
Mass displacement. The United Nations is reporting that over 60,000 people have fled the city just since the RSF takeover began. They're fleeing with nothing, creating a massive, urgent humanitarian emergency in an already fragile region.
And the UN is worried about abuses happening inside the city now.
Deeply worried. Given the RSF's track record, there are grave concerns about potential mass killing, sexual violence, and other severe human rights violations targeting civilians, particularly certain ethnic groups. The UN is calling for immediate deployment of human rights monitors to investigate these allegations.
And the personal stories emerging are just devastating, aren't they?
They are. There was one particularly harrowing account reported of a 12-year-old boy who fled El-Fasher alone. He described being stopped by armed men, accused of spying simply for having a phone, and then being severely beaten.
12-year-old?
Yes. His story is just one example, but it paints a terrifying picture of the lawlessness and brutality civilians are facing, and the particular vulnerability of children caught in this conflict.
It's just an unimaginable situation. Let's turn to another area of concern, Tanzania, following their recent election.
Yes, the election results themselves were overwhelming. The incumbent president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, was declared the winner with reportedly 98% of the vote.
98%. That figure alone usually raises eyebrows internationally.
It certainly does, and the context makes it even more contentious. Key opposition parties were effectively barred from participating, with some leaders jailed or disqualified beforehand.
So, not exactly a level playing field.
Mhm.
How did the opposition and public react?
There were widespread protests following the announcement of the results. Opposition groups claim these protests were met with a violent crackdown by state security forces.
How violent? Are there estimates of casualties?
The opposition groups are making very serious claims, alleging that somewhere between 500 and 700 people were killed during these post-election clashes and the subsequent crackdown.
500 to 700 deaths. That's a huge number. Has this been verified?
These are claims from the opposition, so independent verification is difficult, especially if access is restricted. However, the reports are serious enough that the United Nations and other international bodies have called for a thorough and impartial investigation into the alleged killings and human rights abuses.
A very worrying situation regarding democratic processes and state violence there. Okay, let's look at some diplomatic shifts. A potential thawing between the U.S. and China on trade.
A slight thought, perhaps, emerging from the recent APEC, Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit meetings. The headline is a one-year suspension of some of the more severe trade tariffs and restrictions between the two countries.
A one-year truce. That provides some breathing room for businesses, I imagine.
It does offer some immediate relief, yes.
Yeah.
It dials back the intensity of the trade war rhetoric and avoids further escalation for now. Businesses caught in the crossfire will certainly welcome that predictability, even if it's temporary.
But is it a real resolution or just kicking the can down the road? Are the fundamental disagreements still there?
Most analysts are quite skeptical about long-term resolution. The core issues, things like disputes over technology transfer, intellectual property rights, market access, state subsidies, those fundamental disagreements haven't gone away. This looks more like a tactical pause than a strategic breakthrough.
So enjoy the quiet while it lasts, basically.
That seems to be the sentiment. The underlying tensions and competition remain very strong.
Interesting. And elsewhere in Asia, we see the U.S. resuming military ties with Cambodia.
Yes, this is quite notable. The U.S. and Cambodia are holding joint military exercises known as Angkor Sentinel for the first time in 8 years.
Why the 8-year gap?
Ties were suspended largely due to U.S. concerns over Cambodia's democratic backsliding and its increasingly close relationship with China, particularly regarding military cooperation.
So what's changed to allow these drills to resume?
It seems to be part of a broader, cautious re-engagement strategy. There was also a recent Trump administration-supported peace deal that helped resolve a long-standing border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia, which might have improved the regional atmosphere.
And is this linked to concerns about China's influence at Cambodia's Ream naval base?
That's almost certainly part of the context. The U.S. has been very worried about China funding upgrades at Ream and potentially gaining privileged access for its navy there. Resuming military ties like the Angkor Sentinel drills, and potentially even a U.S. naval visit to Ream in the future, could be seen as a U.S. effort to counterbalance Chinese influence and rebuild some level of military-to-military relationship with Cambodia.
The delicate diplomatic dance trying to pull Cambodia's slightly back from Beijing's orbit.
Potentially, yes. It's about maintaining lines of communication and offering alternatives, even with governments Washington has disagreements with.
Okay, let's shift back to the domestic front in the U.S. and look at the very real, very painful economic and climate headwinds people are facing. The government shutdown we touched on earlier. What are the tangible impacts beyond the political deadlock?
The impacts are severe and widespread. We mentioned the food security issue, which is critical. Reports indicate around 42 million Americans are facing acute food insecurity because of cuts or delays to federal aid programs, particularly SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, often known as food stamps.
42 million. That's a staggering number facing hunger due to a political fight.
It really is, and it highlights how vulnerable many households are and how dependent they are on these federal support systems working consistently.
And the courts had to intervene on SNAP.
Yes, federal judges actually ruled that the administration's attempt under President Trump to suspend or halt SNAP funding amidst the shutdown was unlawful. They mandated the release of emergency funds to keep the program running.
A legal backstop against the political maneuvering. Did the administration agree?
Reports suggest the Trump administration has agreed in principle to comply with the court order and release the funds, though they might be seeking clarification on the specifics. So hopefully that aid will continue to flow, but the initial disruption and uncertainty caused significant hardship.
And it's not just food aid. The shutdown is gumming up the works elsewhere too. Air travel.
Yes, air travel is being significantly impacted. The Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, is reporting staff shortages at dozens of air traffic control facilities, maybe around 35 sites mentioned.
Staff shortages because federal workers aren't getting paid or being furloughed.
Exactly. This is leading to reduced capacity to manage air traffic safely, resulting in widespread flight delays and cancellations across the country. It's a direct consequence impacting potentially millions of travelers and the economy. There were even anecdotal reports of lawmakers getting stuck due to delays.
When the politicians can't fly, maybe things will change. But seriously, it shows how interconnected everything is and how dependent we are on government services functioning.
Absolutely. From food aid to air safety, the shutdown reveals the fragility of these systems when political paralysis takes hold.
Okay, shifting from immediate crises to market anxieties. Michael Burry is back in the news.
Yes. Michael Burry, the investor made famous by the book and movie The Big Short for predicting the 2007 housing market crash.
The ultimate financial Cassandra.
Pretty much. He's resurfaced recently, making public statements expressing serious concerns about the current financial climate.
What's he worried about this time? Same thing. Housing.
He's apparently sounding alarms again about potential trouble in the housing market, possibly linked to inflation and maybe broader economic instability. He hasn't laid out his full thesis publicly in detail, as far as I know, but when Burry warns about systemic risk, people in the financial world tend to pay attention, given his track record.
A worrying voice to hear, adding to the economic uncertainty. Let's talk about the cost of goods, specifically things like coffee and cocoa. Prices are high, so why is fair trade still important? Doesn't high price mean farmers are doing well?
Not necessarily, and that's the key point.
Right.
While commodity prices for coffee and cocoa might be high on the global market right now, that volatility often doesn't translate into stable income for the small-scale farmers who grow the vast majority of it.
Why not?
Several reasons. Firstly, their own production costs are often rising sharply due to factors like climate change, unpredictable weather, new pests and diseases ruining harvests. Secondly, they often lack bargaining power and are forced to sell to intermediaries at much lower prices than the final market rate.
So the high price you pay in the supermarket doesn't fully reach the farmer.
Often, only a small fraction does. And the volatility itself is risky. A boom year might be followed by a bust. Fair trade systems aim to provide a safety net, a minimum guaranteed price that covers the cost of sustainable production, plus a premium for community development projects.
So it's about stability and sustainability, not just the current market peak.
Exactly. It helps farmers weather the storms, both literal and economic, invest in climate-resilient practices, and avoid situations where coffee or cocoa farming becomes simply unsustainable, potentially turning these everyday items into unaffordable luxuries in the long run. It's vital for keeping those supply chains viable.
Okay, let's cross the Atlantic and look at energy policy in the UK. There's talk of a major shift away from their green targets.
Yes, a significant report has emerged suggesting the UK government needs to rethink its energy strategy. The previous focus was heavily on Clean Power 2030, pushing rapidly towards renewable energy sources.
And the problem is?
The problem is the cost. The report argues that these policies, while well-intentioned, have contributed to extremely high electricity prices for consumers and businesses, exacerbating the cost of living crisis.
So they need to prioritize affordability now.
That's the recommendation. Shift the immediate focus to Cheaper Power 2030. This means managing current energy demands and costs more effectively, potentially slowing down the transition in some areas and pushing the hard deadline for achieving net zero emissions further out, towards 2050.
A pragmatic adjustment to economic reality, or a rollback on climate commitments.
It's being debated as both, frankly. Supporters call it a necessary correction to protect households and industry. Critics worry it signals a weakening of climate ambition at a critical time. It's a difficult balancing act many countries are facing.
Meanwhile, in France, they're grappling with the opposite end of the economic spectrum: wealth inequality. There's a debate about taxing the super rich.
Yes, there are competing proposals being debated in the French parliament aimed squarely at taxing the assets of the wealthiest individuals, not just their income.
A wealth tax, that's often controversial. What are the proposals?
One prominent proposal is being called the Zucman tax, named after the economist Gabriel Zucman. It suggests a minimum annual tax rate, maybe 2%, on total assets for individuals holding more than 100 million euros.
Taxing their total wealth, property, stocks, everything each year.
That's the idea. There's also a rival proposal from the Socialist Party that's slightly different, perhaps proposing a 3% rate. The core idea in both is to directly address wealth concentration and generate revenue for public services by taxing accumulated fortunes, not just yearly earnings.
A fundamental debate about fairness and redistribution playing out there. And France is also dealing very directly with the physical impacts of climate change, particularly coastal erosion near Mont Saint-Michel.
Yes, the situation near the famous Mont Saint-Michel Bay is quite stark. The village of Saint-Jean-Thomas, which is on that coastline, is experiencing severe erosion.
How severe?
Reports indicate the coastline there has retreated by as much as 300 meters. That's nearly 1,000 feet over the past 70 years.
300 meters, that's massive. What's causing it?
It's a combination of factors linked to climate change. Rising sea levels making storm surges more impactful, and potentially increased storm frequency and intensity battering the coast. Homes and infrastructure are literally crumbling into the sea.
A very visible, very immediate climate crisis impact.
Absolutely. It forces difficult decisions about managed retreat, coastal defenses, and how communities adapt when their land is actively disappearing. It's happening on coastlines around the world, but this is a particularly poignant example in a well-known location.
And sticking with climate impacts, the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa in the Caribbean sounds dire, especially in Jamaica.
Yes, Melissa hit as a Category 3 storm, causing significant damage. Reports from the Black River area in Jamaica paint a grim picture of the aftermath.
What's happening there?
Residents are reportedly struggling severely due to a lack of sufficient and timely aid reaching them. There are accounts of people having to scavenge for food in the streets because official relief efforts have been inadequate or slow.
A breakdown in the disaster response system.
It appears so, at least in that specific area. It highlights the vulnerability of island nations to these powerful storms and the critical importance of effective, rapid post-disaster support.
And interestingly, despite political tensions, the U.S. offered aid to Cuba after Melissa.
Yes, that was a notable development. The U.S. did make an offer of humanitarian assistance to Cuba, which was also affected by the hurricane. While it might be driven purely by humanitarian concerns, any cooperation like that, given the usual state of U.S.-Cuba relations, is interesting. Sometimes shared crises can create small openings.
Okay, let's move into our final section, looking at democratic procedures, social justice, and accountability. Back in the U.S., the political fight over the Senate filibuster flared up again during the shutdown.
It did. President Trump publicly called for Senate Republicans to eliminate the filibuster rule.
Why? What was his reasoning?
His argument was that the filibuster was allowing Senate Democrats, despite being in the minority, to block the funding bills needed to reopen the government. He wanted to remove that obstacle so Republicans could pass the bills with their simple majority.
Get rid of the 60-vote requirement, basically. How did Senate Republicans respond to their president's call?
They rejected it almost immediately. Key figures like Senators John Thune and John Barrasso publicly pushed back, defending the filibuster.
Even though it was hindering their own party's immediate goal of ending the shutdown, why defend it?
Because they see the filibuster as fundamental to the Senate's role. Their argument is that it protects the rights of the minority party, whichever party that happens to be at the time, and prevents the majority from simply steamrolling legislation through. It forces negotiation and consensus, they argue, and preserves procedural stability. Many senators are reluctant to scrap a tool they might need themselves when their party is back in the minority.
A defense of institutional procedure over short-term political gain. Interesting. Meanwhile, on voting rights, there was a significant court ruling.
Yes, a federal judge issued a ruling that permanently blocks attempts, strongly associated with the Trump administration's policy goals, to require documentary proof of citizenship on the federal voter registration form.
What's the significance of that ruling?
It's a major victory for voting rights groups and democratic organizations who argued such requirements would disenfranchise eligible voters, particularly naturalized citizens, minorities, and low-income individuals who might find it harder to obtain or present specific documents. The court essentially upheld the principle that the existing attestation of citizenship under penalty of perjury is sufficient for federal registration.
So preventing an additional barrier to voting from being imposed at the federal level.
Correct. It reinforces existing federal voting registration law against that specific type of state-level requirement being imposed on the federal form.
And within the Republican Party itself, we saw some internal conflict play out very publicly. Senator McConnell criticizing the Heritage Foundation.
Yes, that was quite pointed. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell publicly took aim at the Heritage Foundation, a very influential conservative think tank.
What was his criticism about?
It was specifically about Heritage continuing to support or associate with commentator Tucker Carlson, particularly in light of recent remarks Carlson made that McConnell and others deemed anti-Semitic.
So McConnell drawing a line.
Very clearly. He stated explicitly something to the effect of, conservatives should feel no obligation to carry water for anti-Semites. This highlights a significant rift within the conservative movement about its identity, its acceptable boundaries, and how to deal with controversial figures who command large audiences but also attract accusations of extremism. It's a fight for the soul of the party, in some ways.
Okay, let's shift overseas now to South Africa and a really significant historical correction. A court ruling about the death of Nkosi Albert Luthuli.
Yes, this is huge. Nkosi Luthuli was a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, president of the African National Congress, ANC, and a leading figure in the anti-apartheid struggle. He officially died in 1967 after reportedly being hit by a train.
Officially an accident, but there were always suspicions.
Always. Many in the anti-apartheid movement believed he was murdered by the security forces. Now, decades later, a South African court has overturned the original 1967 inquest finding.
And what did the new ruling conclude?
It concluded that Nkosi Luthuli was, in fact, murdered by apartheid police, potentially acting in collusion with railway workers, and that his death was staged to look like a train accident.
Wow. A direct confirmation of state-sponsored murder. That's a massive indication for his family and the ANC's historical narrative.
Absolutely. It's a landmark ruling for truth and reconciliation in South Africa, acknowledging the brutal realities of the apartheid regime and validating the long-held beliefs of those who fought against it. It underscores the ongoing process of uncovering and confronting the crimes of that era.
A powerful moment of historical justice. Turning to the ongoing situation in the Middle East, there's news regarding accountability within the Israeli military.
Yes, specifically involving the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF's top legal official, Major General Yifat Tomer Yerushalmi, who served as the military advocate general, has resigned.
Resigned? Why?
Her resignation is reportedly linked to her admitting she approved the leak of a controversial video.
What did the video show?
It allegedly depicted Israeli soldiers abusing a Palestinian detainee at the Sled Taiman facility, a detention center that has faced scrutiny over conditions and treatment of prisoners.
So she approved leaking a video showing potential abuse by IDF soldiers.
That appears to be the situation. The leak itself and the content of the video caused significant controversy. Several reservist soldiers are now facing legal charges related to the alleged abuse shown in the video. Her resignation seems tied to the fallout from her decision regarding the leak and the broader scrutiny of conduct at that facility. It points to internal pressures for accountability.
Okay, we also need to address a horrific case of gender-based violence reported out of Argentina.
Yes, this is deeply disturbing. An individual named Pablo Rodriguez Lorta was arrested in Argentina. He's known as the founder of an anti-feminist group in Uruguay called Varones Unidos, which translates to Men United.
And what was he arrested for?
He was arrested for the alleged double femicide of his former partner Luna Giardina and her mother Mariel Zamudio.
Femicide, the killing of women because of their gender. This sounds like a case with a history.
Tragically, yes. Reports indicate Lorta had a documented history of violence against Mr. Giardina, and there was even a restraining order issued against him.
Which clearly failed to protect her.
Utterly. This case starkly highlights the often fatal failures within the justice and security systems to adequately protect women from abusers, even when restraining orders are in place. It also underscores the devastating reality of femicide rates in Argentina, which remain tragically high. The report mentioned 178 cases recorded already in 2025.
Just awful. And it connects to the dangerous ideology promoted by groups like the one he founded.
Indeed. It puts a spotlight on the violent, real-world consequences that can stem from organized anti-feminist movements and misogynistic ideologies.
Okay, turning to a different sphere, culture and royalty. Prince Andrew has faced further repercussions.
Yes, following the ongoing fallout from his association with Jeffrey Epstein and the sexual assault allegations made by Virginia Giuffre, which he settled out of court, the royal family has taken further steps.
He already lost his military titles and royal patronages, right?
Correct. Now, he's effectively been stripped of the use of his Royal Highness, HRH style in any official capacity. He's now generally referred to simply as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
Just his family name. How has this been received?
Reports describe the official palace statement outlining this as very brutal in its finality. Virginia Giuffre's family reportedly called it a form of vindication. There's still uncertainty about his living situation, with delays reported in his expected move out of the Royal Lodge residence. It signifies a definitive public demotion within the family structure.
A significant fall from grace. Let's shift to sports, where athletes seem to be increasingly vocal in demanding change and equality.
Absolutely. We're seeing strong pushes in several areas. In tennis, top player Aryna Sabalenka has been very outspoken.
What's she calling for?
She's demanding that the organizers of the Grand Slam tournaments, the biggest events in tennis, come to the table to seriously discuss improving prize money equity between men and women and also address broader player welfare concerns.
Using her platform to push for systemic change in her sport.
Exactly. And in boxing, we saw a similar bold move from British boxer Chantelle Cameron.
What did she do?
She decided to vacate her WBC, World Boxing Council, light welterweight world title.
Gave up her championship belt. Why?
As a protest. She stated it was because of the ongoing lack of equality in rules and recognition between male and female fighters within professional boxing. She felt vacating the title was a necessary statement to highlight those disparities.
Wow. Sacrificing a world title to make a point about fairness. That's powerful.
It really is. Both Sabalenka and Cameron are examples of high-profile athletes increasingly willing to risk backlash or personal costs to advocate for fundamental changes toward equality in their respective sports.
And one final note on changing norms, this one about housing in the UK. A surprising finding about rental listings.
Yeah, it's an interesting indicator of urban living trends. A study found that nearly a third of rental property listings in the UK now lack what would be considered a traditional separate living room.
A third. No dedicated living room. What do they have instead?
Often it's combined kitchen living dining spaces, or sometimes just bedrooms and a kitchen with no communal relaxation area at all.
Why is this happening? Just smaller apartments due to cost and density.
That's a big part of it, developers maximizing space in dense urban areas. But it also might reflect changing lifestyles and renter expectations. Perhaps younger renters prioritize location or private bedroom space over a formal living room, or maybe communal spaces in buildings are becoming more common. It signals a shift in how living space is valued and designed in modern cities.
Fascinating. Okay, that brings us towards the end of our deep dive today. What a journey.
It really has been, from the edges of the solar system down to the struggles within households and nations.
You know, when you pull back and look at all these disparate threads, the intense pressure for accountability, whether it's in South Africa rewriting history or within the IDF or even the royal family.
And you contrast that with the sheer scale of human need, like the food crisis during the shutdown or the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa or the potential population undercount.
Set against this backdrop of incredible technological leaps, like AWS powering AI or China's space ambitions or even rediscovering ancient fish in museum drawers. It feels like we're living in an age of extremes, extreme knowledge, extreme crisis, extreme connection, extreme division.
And maybe extreme distraction, too. Which brings us to that final thought we like to leave listeners with.
Right. So think about this concept of transparency. We live in an era awash with information, right? AI chatbots can answer anything. Social media connects billions instantly. Data is everywhere.
But at the same time, we've discussed profound secrecy. Nation-state hackers operating silently for months, the hidden dynamics under Antarctic ice, the classified details of military buildups or covert operations, maybe even the real number of people on Earth.
So the provocative thought for you, the listener, is this. When you encounter the news, when you scroll through your feeds, how much of what you're seeing is designed not just to inform, but potentially to distract?
Is the outrage cycle over a politician's minor gaffe, or maybe their luxurious home renovation, actually serving to pull focus away from a much larger systemic issue? Is the timing of a celebrity scandal, or even a seemingly frivolous story like a flying car tease, strategically deployed to shift the media narrative away from something more substantial happening elsewhere?
We're not saying it's all conspiracy, but we are encouraging you to develop a critical eye for the intent behind the headlines. What story is being foregrounded, and more importantly, what story might be deliberately pushed into the background.
Consider what powerful interests might benefit from you focusing on the shiny object rather than the complex machinery operating just out of sight. Because sometimes the most crucial information isn't what's shouted the loudest, but what's happening quietly, systemically, beneath the surface.
Keep digging, keep questioning the narrative. We'll be back next time to dive deep again.
Until then, stay curious.
Enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm,
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially
Awesome.
Informed.
Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.